so it's 12:30 and we're about to start the Cutting Through the Noise session, and we're going to look at social media and media campaigning. So I'd like to hand over to Molly Anders, who's the Research Impact, Communications and Engagement Lead for Development Engagement Lab, and I think she'll introduce herself a little bit in a bit more depth as well. So over to you, Molly.
Thanks, Stella. Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this session, which is called Cutting Through the Noise, Media and Social Media Campaigning. As Stella said, my name is Molly Anders. I'm the Research Impact, Communications and Engagement Lead at the Development Engagement Lab, and I'm also the former UK correspondent for DevX, which is the media platform for the global development community. The Development Engagement Lab is a research organization housed at the University College London and funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Our aim is to explore the public's relationship with aid and global development using qualitative research methods. We research both the specific issues that the public engage with, as well as how they engage, so what platforms they use and how they respond to campaigns and appeals. Now, our aim in this session is to gain an insight into how to be heard in a crowded media environment. Kind of a big ask for an hour session, if I must say, but we have two incredible speakers with a wealth of experience who have kindly agreed to share their thoughts and insights. Before I introduce the speakers, though, I'm going to quickly show you a couple of slides about the current landscape for media campaigning during the COVID era. So just bear with me while I pull that up. Okay, so hopefully that's showing up there. As I said, we at the Development Engagement Lab, we conduct this research in 4 countries: France, Germany, Great Britain, and the United States. And we've recently run quite a bit of surveys around COVID and how people are engaging in the COVID era. As you can imagine, things have changed quite a bit. People are on social media a lot more. People are watching more TV, which is obviously an excellent opportunity for those campaigning in the sector. Unfortunately, there is some negative news here. So it turns out that at the moment, when it comes to COVID, the public actually trusts social media least among a range of sources of information. Now, this is very specifically around COVID. And as you can see there, social media, television news, social media is at the very bottom in terms of trust. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that we have our work cut out for us, for those of us doing social media campaigning. It just means that when you're trying to convey information about COVID, people are skeptical about that. But I'm going to offer a couple of insights that we have. I just wanted to show too that of the 3 countries that we've done this research in, let me just go back there. Yeah, it's been the case everywhere, basically, that social media falls lowest. Government leaders like Boris Johnson and Donald Trump, perhaps unsurprisingly, are the only other least trusted sources of information. But there is quite a bit of good news. As you can see, in the wake of COVID, the public expressed unequivocally that they support international cooperation in the wake of this crisis. So 79% of the British public agree that COVID-19 shows international cooperation is more important than ever. And that's, again, true across all of the countries that we looked at. More good news, 2/3 of the public reported feeling safer as part of a coordinated global response to the pandemic, so not going it alone. And once again, this was true across all of the countries that we surveyed. The challenge now for us as campaigners is to convert public support for international cooperation in response to COVID to support for development cooperations as well, and an increased awareness of those efforts. So some really good news for you here, actually. So we've done some surveys around the types of messages that are resonating with the public at the moment, particularly around COVID-19. And it's true that messages that create feelings of hope rather than pity, fear or anger inspire engagement. So keeping messages positive really bring people closer to engaging with these issues. The top performing messages, quickly you can see basically just the very positive slant. I want our government to work with other governments to ensure scientists have the funding they need to find treatments and vaccines. The only way to stop the coronavirus is to test, treat, and prevent. crisis shows that investments in public health and development aid should not be viewed as a drain on resources. There's a strong need to build a social safety net for all, even within high-income countries. This idea that we're all in it together pervades all of the positive messages that we tested. Just a quick kind of spread of the kind of words that were chosen over and over again. Really positive, again, response, provide, scientists, vaccine, circle, investment. Yeah, so it's rebuild, health, accomplishment. So people need to be reminded basically of our accomplishments in the past and in the run up to this crisis. And people are very open to those conversations. Then we also did some messenger testing. This was before COVID, but again, unequivocally in all the countries that we tested, frontline workers are the highest rated messengers. So they, the public really relate to this group. The second most popular are, many of you all, volunteers. That people really like to see people who have decided to volunteer their time to speak to them about these issues. So again, very positive news for us there. Statements that convey a unifying global approach resonate, as do messages about science and vaccines, and those highlighting the joined vulnerability in the global south, for example. So that's it from me. And with that, I'm happy also to provide those slides if anybody would like any more information. But in the meantime, I'm very excited to introduce our speakers. So the first is Annabelle Roberts, who is the Digital Campaigns Officer for Global Citizen. She leads Global Citizen's UK campaigns work and manages its international digital campaigns on key issues including health, education, and women's rights. Prior to Global Citizen, Annabelle worked for the Global Campaigns team of the United Nations Refugee Agency in Geneva and as a humanitarian volunteer with refugees in the Gulf of Aden. She is passionate about mobilizing people to raise their voice for a fairer world and holds a master's in international relations from SOAS. So actually with that, Annabelle, can I hand it over to you, and would you like to give us your thoughts?
Hi, absolutely. It's a pleasure to speak today. I'm also going to share my screen.
Let me just get out of mine, will I? Maybe that would help.
Yes, thank you so much. While you're doing that, basically I'm just going to give a short presentation on how people, whether it's grassroots or whether it's at an organization level, can utilize really simple digital tools to enhance and amplify their campaigns, especially during COVID, when our normal channels of campaigning are somewhat limited. So with that, let me share my screen now. Okay. Great. I assume everyone can see that. Yeah, so basically today I want to talk to you about the tools that can be useful when it comes to effectively engaging at any level. And so firstly, well, why does it matter? Well, throughout history, we've seen that most of the rights that we enjoy today, whether that's voting or even just enjoying the weekend, have come because people have raised their voices. A lot of people, ordinary people, have spoken to those in power and demanded change. And up until coronavirus hit, we were seeing this on a large scale globally with the Fridays for Future movement, with people getting on the streets and really making their voices heard in a way that was quite new and exciting to a lot of people. And now that COVID has happened, we're in a very different world, but people still want to raise their voice and to make a difference. And luckily we have the tools to hand to be able to do that and to channel that passion and activism to leaders on digital platforms. So you can see below, there are platforms where you can target leaders such as Twitter, platforms to influence such as Instagram, the ability to share and amplify the campaigns that you're running, the petitions that you're running, the messages that you want to go across. And today I'm just going to speak through 3 different examples of campaigns, 2 of which I've worked on, where that's been done. So firstly, it's actually a Global Citizen campaign, and this is one that we ran during the start of lockdown, which was to get governments to collaborate on a global level to ensure tests, treatments, and vaccines reach everyone in need. And this was difficult because it was at a time when a lot of governments were hesitant to cooperate with each other. They were nervous about the pandemic and more concerned with looking inwards towards their own populations, even though that's not the best way for us to get through it as a planet. So what we did was we managed to get together over 800,000 online actions, and that galvanized 41 governments around the world to respond and to make international commitments to ensuring everyone can access vaccines when they come out, everyone can access the testing equipment needed, and everyone can access treatments to cure COVID. And that amounted to 6.9 billion pledged. Obviously, this is a huge sum, and Global Citizen is in the lucky position that we do have that large platform and those large networks. But I think the lessons from this campaign can be brought across to any campaign, no matter how big or small it is. So, how to keep people engaged from their front rooms. Firstly, digital campaigns tools are really great when it comes to education. One of the ways we did this through Global Citizen was through our Instagram platforms, whether that's using short, concise information in posts, or whether that's utilizing stories to get across information in an engaging way. And this leads me through to collaboration. So for instance, in our stories, we collaborated with musicians and other people that we had connections with to pass the messages across that we wanted to get across about COVID. And again, this can be scaled to any campaign. If you're working on a local campaign, it could be a local celebrity or someone that just has local influence. It's great to bring them on board and to do like an Instagram stories with them. And it really helps connect your messaging in a new way to audiences. And you can also use them when it comes to targeting decision makers as well. So we had a lot of our, again, musicians or talent tweet out to decision makers saying, will you step up? And often if a decision maker has already stepped up, you can say like, oh, Germany's committed this, the UK government, will you step up and do the same? And the good thing about digital media is it's a very public platform to make that ask. So the UK is aware that the world is watching, and especially when it's someone with a lot of followers or influential person tweeting them about that they know that has huge reach. A lot of people are looking to them to see what they're doing, and that can have a big influence on the decisions they make. And so the different ways that we engaged our global citizens during this period to keep them excited about the campaign that we were doing, past education, was to do a range of sort of digital actions which were fun to take. And so that went from directly tweeting world leaders and waving at them and saying, hi, will you commit to this, to getting active in terms of making the signs that they would have used on the streets to protest and channeling them through digital platforms to get those messages direct to the leaders. So we had a Defeat Disease Together campaign where we got people across the world to make these incredible signs and then presented them to leaders on the internet. So yeah, and finally, just wrapping that up, we ran a campaign to encourage people to wear masks. And that was much more supporter to supporter campaign. And again, it works really well. It gets people to feel that they're part of a bigger movement in what can be quite an isolating time. And just shows people that it's okay and it's normal to wear masks and it's safe to wear masks, and we're all in this together, as Molly was saying from her previous slides. So that brings me from a very large global campaign to what I'm going to talk about next, which is a much more grassroots campaign started by individuals without a large NGO directing it as such, but the same messages apply. So my second case study I want to talk to you about is called Europe Must Act. And this again is a campaign that was launched during the lockdown, and so couldn't use the normal tools of meetups, protests, that sort of thing that you might normally go for. So how do you kick off a digital campaign to grow support? Well, the first thing you can do, whether it's your local organization, the best thing you can do is set up a Facebook group and set up an Instagram page. Because these pages allow you to update supporters, allow people to feel that they're part of a bigger community when they can't meet up, and they're a great way to grow your influence. So one of the things that we did for this campaign was we ran a digital challenge across Refugee Week. We had every day of the week, you had something that you have to do as a supporter, which isn't a heavy lift, it's really quite a light and fun activity to do. So it was read one of these 6 books. You can see some of the images on the screen right now. Friday's action is to watch a film on exile. And that saw us increase our followers on Instagram, for example, from 120 followers at the start of the week to over 500 followers by the end of the week. So it just shows how powerful a digital tool can be in terms of really getting a broader audience for your messaging. And that's just ordinary people, and there are so many great tools out there right now for people to make images and designs that they can use online. Canva is a really good one. It's totally free, and some of the designs that you can see on there were made on that. So challenges are great, and also again they're a great way to show the community behind your campaign. So if you look at this Scotland Must Act Welcome Refugees sign, it turns the campaign from maybe a faceless logo to all the people that are asking their MPs to step up and support and welcome refugees at home. And that's one, great to encourage other people to get involved in your movement, but also it's good to use as a tool both directed at MPs and in local media. So this image was then picked up by several local newspapers because it really appeals, and it's a really visually direct way of getting your campaign message across. So that's a great benefit. And similar to the Global Citizen one I just mentioned, you can see the Glasgow Must Act Refugees Welcome sign in the bottom there. That's again like bringing protests online, getting people to make their signs anyway, to post them, to use a common hashtag, and to really sort of flood digital channels with that message in the same way that you'd flood the streets with a protest. And so one final point on this would be the support networks that digital campaigns can give. So not only encouraging people to take action, but helping each other out. So for instance, this campaign is based whenever someone decides to set it up in their local area. So it's across the UK and across Europe. And so WhatsApp or Slack or things like that are key for keeping the people running the campaigns in those different areas connected and coordinated. And you can see that the small image in the corner there, just with everyone welcoming a new member, it creates a real sense of these online platforms can create a real sense of community within the space for people who are running these campaigns, not just the supporters taking actions. So how can we use digital platforms to amplify traditional media? Do the two go together? The answer is very much yes. They really are a match made in heaven when it comes to amplifying the messaging that you're running. So for instance, one example we could use here is you have a traditional campaign activity of writing to your MP. If the MP then responds in a positive way, what you can do is you can reach out to your local press and ask them to run it as a story, which is what happened when this South Ayrshire Council agreed to rehome refugees. And so then this was run in a very local paper, but what we did was we took that story, we put it on the internet, we retweeted it from lots of different accounts across the UK, and then because we retweeted it, it was taken up by a much larger NGO who have thousands of followers, and then they retweeted that article, and you can just see that from this very local paper, from one person reaching out to their MP, you now have hundreds of people across the UK getting that story. And so that's a really powerful example, I think, of when digital tools are used effectively. And there have been instances of that across the campaign. So, for instance, when Nicola Sturgeon agreed to take in refugees, we again created a press release, which is like a short version of the story that you want your local press to run. And that was taken up by about 5 or 6 papers. And the good thing about going to the paper with a press release is you can include your own organisation. So your organisation is getting name recognition in those papers as well. And again, when you have local articles like this or traditional media articles, they're great to use to target MPs themselves on Twitter. And I one, to say other people are doing this, will you do the same? But 2, because by having your campaign in traditional media gives it a real sense of legitimacy. So both partner really well. You get the message to the MPs, and the MPs also see that your campaign is something to be taken seriously because it's something that's been written about by others. Great, I think that's it on that page. Just to say as well, you can see this, one of the images shows people doing a live action, and that's also a really nice marriage of live action plus digital media. So at the moment, if you can't have too many people getting together because of COVID-19 restrictions, you can have 1 or 2 people do a very visual stunt, or in this case it was throwing petals in a river, and then have that taken up by newspapers so that your story is still being amplified. And it's a nice compromise way to do it. So now we've covered building your campaign and the relationship of digital tools and the press. I want to just talk about digital tools and contacting MPs. This is an example of a campaign that I haven't worked on, but I noticed recently, and I was really impressed by the way that they're using social media to really encourage MPs to step up. So this is the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill, which is about trying to get the UK to commit to greener targets necessary to combat climate change. And some of the ways that it has gone about reaching MPs has been really quite novel and exciting, and also very easy to do. So, for instance, it might not be possible to have a meeting with MPs at the moment because of COVID, but what you can do is upload a video of yourself, as this woman and her child have done here, and send it directly to the MP, because 99% of MPs have Twitter now. MPs love Twitter. It's a direct channel of communication between you and the MP, and use it if you can, because it's brilliant for that. And so having your face and your voice just makes it so much more personal. It's a really good way of getting their attention, and partnered with writing an email or having another meeting later on down the line, it works really well to push the MP in the direction that you want to go. And so what else you can do is you can email your MP, and then you can follow that up on Twitter and say, I've emailed you, will you respond? You can praise them if they speak out in Parliament, because Parliament's all recorded now. MPs often put up speeches that they've made in Parliament on their Twitter page, and MPs don't want to be told off all the time. They like it when you engage, when they do something well. So if you see that they've spoken out on an issue you care about, it's great to retweet that and really praise them for it, and maybe ask if they will do the next thing that you're interested in them doing. And alongside that, again, if you can interview the MP and turn it into an article, that's great. Or if you want to print out, so you'll see that they've printed out, I support the Climate and Ecological Bill. So you have the same image both online and offline. So people are seeing it in lots of different places. And if you meet your MP and you take a picture with the same image, then everything ties together in a way that really speaks to the human brain. So people remember your campaign. They're seeing it from different areas. MPs remember your campaign because they're seeing it from different areas. So that covers all the main points that I wanted to talk you through as a basic introduction. So to sum up, I'd say there are three really key points of the triangle when it comes to advocacy, media, and social media. And you can run a campaign that is just advocacy and media, or just social media and advocacy, but it's strongest when you have all 3 points together, because they amplify each other, they complement each other, they feed off each other. And if you're a small group of people, you can make your campaign 10 times as loud by using these techniques. So yeah, and just to finalize, running down the side here, digital campaigns help you to tap into the power of storytelling, because they give you so many different ways to tell a story, whether that's through photographs, whether that's through news stories that you're sharing on your Instagram feeds. There's just, whether that's through you taking your own video, there's so much out there to inspire you. And it also allows you to appeal to what your target wants. So check out your MP's page, see what they're interested in, and see if you can find a way to work that into your campaign ask, or an angle to go through that. It allows you to use lots more voices to apply pressure, because you can get your message out to more people. You can find organizations that are doing similar things online, get them to share your petition, get them to ask their supporters to write to MPs for your aims. And finally, yeah, it allows you to work together with people who you might not have been able to get in contact with, whether they're halfway across the country or halfway across the world. Especially platforms like Instagram and Twitter are great for this, particularly Instagram, because other organizations can follow you and can share your stories very easily and stuff like that. So it makes a really collaborative space and a really exciting space, I think, for the future of advocacy and campaigns, and something that anyone can do from their own home, from their own bedroom, as long as you have a laptop. We're good to go. Thank you. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
That's excellent, Annabelle. Really, really fascinating insights here. I just wanted to echo your point about sharing correspondence with MPs, with local media, or even national media. I think from a journalistic perspective, even if the story doesn't end up being the main feature of the piece, it's often used as supportive material for an article. So absolutely don't underestimate that connection if you can. We have a couple of questions for you. So from Amy Denham, you've mentioned that these digital campaigns serve as great community spaces for campaigners online, particularly when it comes to local or regional movements. However, I'm assuming that a lot of people who become a part of the online community were already kind of in the scene. How do you make sure that the campaigns break through any potential echo chamber to reach people that may not consider these issues on a daily basis? You've mentioned targeting traditional media, which I assume feeds into this, but it would be interesting to know if you have other methods as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It is difficult. I think one of the ways you can do that is through trying to connect to people who have audiences outside the space you work in. So like with Global Citizen, we try and use that a lot by using musicians, because we really want to engage people who are not really in that activist space day to day with the messages that we have. So people who are like local celebrities or outside of the normal space, but talk to people in your community, whether that's potentially a local religious organization. There are lots of different ways to do it through different speakers. And then I guess it's trying to make your campaign something fun and colourful and exciting, so that people are prepared. So like social media, things can be shared really far on social media. And even if you have one person who is in the space, if they share something which is engaging on their social media to their 400 friends who aren't in that space, then they're getting that message. And the more exciting and different you can make that message, the more people are likely to stop and click and follow through and maybe get involved themselves. And that's definitely what we saw when we did our Instagram challenge for Refugee Week.
Excellent, great answer. And then Gil Price asked if we can use Instagram from a laptop. We can use Instagram from a laptop. If you navigate to the site, maybe that's a good opportunity actually to talk about Instagram as a kind of specialist tool for campaigning. I find it's absolutely brilliant, but can be a little bit intimidating, I think, to people who mostly use Facebook or Twitter, as it's kind of a combination of the two.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't even have a personal Instagram, so I'm definitely one of those people that was like, oh my goodness, no. But actually it's really intuitive to use. It's been designed to be as easy to use as possible because Instagram wants as many people on it as possible. So don't be scared, set up an account. Like you can use it from your laptop very easily. You have to do stories from your phone, just FYI. But apart from that, it's a really intuitive platform to use. So just jump in and go for it, I would say. And the great thing about Instagram is you might think, oh, it's just pictures, but actually the way it works is people put a lot of, you can go into a lot of detail in the posts that you put by your pictures, and it's shown that people like to engage that way. They do like to read a lot of information next to the picture that you're putting up. So don't be worried that you can't get your messaging across to Instagram. It's actually one of the best platforms to do so.
Excellent. And someone, Vicky Burns, has asked whether you find stories or actual posts more effective on Instagram. Which of them kind of gets shared or seen more often? And is there kind of an appropriate use for each one, in your opinion? Yep,
that's a really good question. I would say stories. Stories are great because you can do so many of them. You can do them very easily. With posts you have to create it a bit. It can take a bit of time. But stories, you can share other people's content a lot. And that's really great because if you share their content, they're much more likely to A, notice you, and B, share your content in return. So it's a great way to get your organization known in a much faster knock-on cycle of contacts. And it can be very engaging when you have videos, whether that's videos from the news of things happening or whether it's videos of yourself speaking. And it's great to get people involved in story challenges. So people might be unwilling to post on their feed because they like the look of it, but they're not unwilling to do a hashtag stories where they're raising an issue. And that's a really great way to get involvement. Yeah.
That's great. Probably have time for one more question. Peter Lemmer has a really good one. So he found some trolling and or skepticism when I shared our MP's question in the House on Facebook. Could it be useful to have some coaching on how to stay on message and enrolling when faced with hostility? And Naveed added that there is training from time to time on dealing with negative messages online, Peter, via the AID Coalition. We can find out if there's anything planned. For our part, Development Engagement Lab has done a bit of research about what's most useful, and we find that not responding is often the best course of action. Often you can get, and often naturally, organically, you'll get sympathetic other volunteers or other followers who can chime in, but it's hard to know sort of how that will turn out because it can just escalate. Any other thoughts on that, Annabelle?
Yeah, I know what it's like to receive those sort of negative messages, and what I would say is like receive it as a really good thing because it means that you have broken out of your echo chamber with what you're trying to talk about. And yeah, I would completely agree. I'm very excited whenever I get a troll post on our page, and then I ignore the post or I delete it from the Facebook if it's depending on what it says. But yeah, I never engage, but I think it's a good sign that your message is breaking through boundaries.
Nice one, thank you.
That's excellent. And yes, the first time I've heard anyone be excited about trolls. I think it's certainly probably a good approach to take it as a compliment. And yes, as Annabelle said, you're breaking out of your echo chamber. Thank you so much, Annabelle. That was absolutely fascinating. And keep those questions coming. If others have more questions for Annabelle, as we can maybe deal with those at the end, or otherwise we can follow up afterwards. So now I would like to introduce Kajal Odedra, who is the Executive Director of Change.org UK. Kajal is a writer and activist with over 12 years experience in the campaign sector. She has grown Change.org UK, the largest petition platform, to over 17 million users in the UK. She has supported some of the biggest people-powered campaigns in the UK, from Laura Corrigan's campaign to end the tampon tax, to Richard Radcliffe's fight to free his wife Nazanin from prison in Iran. She founded the People of Color and Campaigns Network and is also a trustee for Save the Children UK. Her first book, Do Something, Activism for Everyone, A Guide to Grassroots Activism, is out now. Kajal, I have questions for you. So maybe we could start with the first one and kind of get your thoughts if that's okay. So my first question is, could you tell us a bit about why you do the work you do, your motivations for campaigning and writing, for example?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for having me. It's been really enjoyable listening to you and Annabelle speaking. I got into this work. I think it's you know, really connected to my upbringing. But I mean, if you just take a step back and look around you in society, most decision makers that rules society, so from NGOs to Parliament to our institutions, are run by the same type of people who went to the same kinds of schools, went to the same universities, and socialized in the same circles. And they have a very limited or very you know, narrow lived experience. And I think that our society should be shaped by a diverse set of people who have many different types of lived experiences so that it works for everybody. I grew up in the Midlands in a white working class village, and my parents are immigrants from India and Uganda. And I grew up feeling quite like an outsider. We dealt with a lot of racism and abuse. And one of the hardest things during that time was honestly not being heard by the authorities or the teachers, the police, the council, and really fighting hard to try to get heard. And seeing my mum and dad, you know, just really, you know, day after day, year after year, try to make things better for us. And I think that that really impacted me. So when I went into the kind of campaigning world, I started working in for charities, but it just didn't really satisfy me. And I've realized now that I really, what didn't work for me was often charities, not all, but often charities have a tendency to speak on behalf of people affected by the issue, rather than actually building up the power of those people affected and helping them speak for themselves. And that's basically what we do at change.org. You know, people start petitions and we kind of, I think of us as being the wind beneath their wings. Like we kind of like circle around them and try and help them, giving them campaign strategy advice, media coaching, but it's their campaign and they are shaping it. And the growth that you see in that person from the start to the end of their campaign is incredible. It's like nothing else. And yeah, and I think also just kind of some of the things that Annabelle was saying, I think another reason that I really love this work is the sense of community that it provides. It's I think, you know, we're all looking for community in one way or another, and that's why, you know, lots of you are here today. You're part of a community, and that feels really incredible.
Excellent answer, Kajal. That's really, and it really resonated with me what you said about kind of turning the tide on the way that we portray people in the global South, for example, and using messages and using platforms and visuals that empower and put the sort of power in their hands. We've done research as well that shows in the long run, the old-fashioned kind of campaigning and appeals, it depresses hope in the public. And in the long term, it means that they won't be engaged because they don't feel like anything is changing. So yeah, I hope we're reaching kind of a watershed moment in that regard. My next question, you know, in your opinion, what makes a campaign memorable or successful? What are kind of the key sort of indicators of success in your view?
Yeah, well, it's some just interesting stats that we did a review of the petition started on our site. So we get, you know, thousands and thousands of petitions started on our site globally. And we found that even though men start more petitions, women under 35 win more. So you just need to be a young woman. That's not true. And you know, anyone can win a campaign, but it's an interesting statistic. what we found is that the campaigns that tend to be more, more likely to win have a specific ask. So they're not, campaigning to end climate change. They're being really, really specific. So maybe they're targeting Sainsbury's or their local Sainsbury's even, getting really, really specific to reduce plastics, for example. So the really specific ask, the right decision maker. So it's not always the most senior person that you can think of as the decision maker. Sometimes, there's a minister or a local councillor who can actually has a lot of power and aren't used to being targeted. So that's the right decision maker. And then finally, a personal story, because that really connects to people. There's one thing kind of starting a campaign saying, I want Sainsbury's to cut out plastics. And then there's another thing really talking about my experiences, why I care about the environment, why the environment is important and special to me, because that just really reaches out to the people reading, and tend to be the ones where, a person has a lived experience. And I've just found that you can't argue. You can argue with statistics, and you can, try to find the alternative argument to a campaign, but you can't argue with someone's lived experiences. So that's really, really powerful. And then I just add on to all of that, the ones that I find the most successful petition starters that I find are the most persistent and passionate. They don't give up. It's not gonna, sometimes a campaign might take many months or many years, but the people that, maybe they're just giving up isn't an option for them. But Laura Corrigan's campaign to end the tampon tax, that lasted around 4 years, I think, and I think maybe she thought that would win by the end of the year when she started it, and but she just kept on going. And the government knew that she was always there. She was always kind of tapping, and she didn't give up. And I think that's really key. Oh, you're still muted.
Thank you. I knew it had to happen at least once. When you're campaigning on issues like international development, that campaigners and members of the public, they may not be directly affected by, how important is storytelling? And why you've answered this a bit in your previous question. Yeah, what is the importance of narrative in that instance?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's I do a really, when we're doing, I do the storytelling workshop, and I'll ask people in a group, name 10 Hollywood films, and people shout them out straight away, and then I'll say name 10 documentaries, and people really struggle to recall 10 documentaries. And I think it's because narrative and storytelling really connects to people, and they're easy to remember. They're really easy to engage in. It connects to you emotionally, and then it also it urges you to act. With all campaigning, that's important. But with international development, when it's not on your doorstep, it's particularly a skill that you particularly need to employ. The campaign that one of our most popular, engaging campaigns that, I'll mention it in a pub or in the Midlands, and people know what I'm talking about, is the campaign to free Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe. And that, most of us haven't had that experience of having a loved one imprisoned, in another country, and having to fight for their release. But it connects to people like nothing else, because Richard is so personal. Richard's Nazanin's husband, when he talks about the campaign, and when he writes to his supporters, he really opens up, and that really connects to people. I was on a train once, and I heard somebody on the train reading out his update to their friend, and I thought that was so remarkable. It's really it's the power of storytelling. And Richard didn't, he's an accountant. He didn't he didn't study this. It's you just got to be vulnerable and authentic.
Yeah, I think, as you said, falling back on personal experience, right, is always, I think, so effective, and is sincere, and therefore I think resonates with people. With decision makers in the UK likely focused on COVID-19 response and mitigating the effects of the recession, do you have any tips for getting their attention at the moment?
I think this period is similar maybe to an election period where you feel like the cycle is just dominated by one thing. But even in an election period, journalists want something else to write about, and the public wants something else to read about, because and your research was really interesting, because that people want to be distracted. They don't just want to be at home reading about COVID all the time. We had the biggest petition in Change.org's history during this period, and it wasn't about COVID, and it was for justice for George Floyd. So that happened during this period. It's a particularly, like you said, people are online more than ever. We found we studied the activity on our site in all our countries and found that civic engagement had increased by 80% during this period, and that's not just related to COVID campaigns. So it's whatever your issue, don't wait. Do push it out now. But the key, I think, is creating a sense of urgency. I think when the George Floyd case happened, there was a real sense of urgency, and that's what led people to really sign, share, get out onto the streets. And the key really is that whatever your campaign is, like, think about, like, why is the time now? Why does it need to happen now? And really frame your ask in that way.
Great advice. Yeah, absolutely. I think similar to your comment about George Floyd, I think the DEC Appeal, Disasters Emergency Committee, similarly during the COVID era, had a huge spike in donations to its appeal on Yemen. It was completely unrelated to COVID and had existed before, but obviously saw a huge surge in interest, but partly, I think, because people, as you said, were more engaged online.
Yeah, so if you're thinking of running a campaign, start it now. Like, it's like, people are really, really engaged right now, and it's incredible. I really hope it lasts. We've not seen a massive drop in activity, so I think it's I think we're moving into a new era. It's really exciting.
It's fascinating to know. So how can, given that, how can social media and media engagement be used alongside other campaign tactics like writing to MPs? Do you have kind of a really good example of kind of you doing those things in tandem?
Yeah, I mean, I thought Annabelle's example with the local news was really excellent. And I'd just say that, yeah, agreed. All three are really important. Don't throw everything out at once. I would really recommend, like, planning your campaign, but don't stick diligently to that plan. It's just good to kind of know when you're going to do, different tactics. And I think that it depends on the campaign, but social media and traditional media can give your campaign legitimacy to then go to the decision maker, to then write to the MPs and show them that, this is something that other people care about. It's not just me. This isn't just a one-off concern. This is how many people have signed my petition. This is this is the media that it's getting. We've been working on a campaign at the moment for maternity rights. So at the moment, if you're pregnant, you can't take your birthing partner into appointments with you. You have to go alone. And so we've got a campaigner, a woman who's actually just had her baby, started a campaign with her doula, calling for the government to change this and to allow your partner to go with you. And that's a really, when I was just, saying at the beginning about how society being designed by, basically old white men, just like, that's just a great example of people not understanding the issue. Going through a pregnancy can be a really traumatic and lonely experience, and then to not be able to do it with your partner is really, really difficult. So the campaigner created these social graphics, these cards that people can share online, and basically saying that you can go to IKEA with your family, but you can't go to your hospital appointments on your with your partner. You can go on a holiday, you can go to the pub, but you can't go to the hospital with your partner. And they're not even images, they're just text on these kind of like a card, online card, and they've gone viral, partly I think because people really like sharing information that they think that other people don't know, and now, so and on the back of that going viral, and the petition's got now 300,000 signatures, the media started covering it. So now we're focusing on decision maker engagement, and we're way more likely to get you know, the government to respond to this, having had all of that activity in the run up. And then another thing I'd say, another good tip for campaigning is, you know, if you're targeting, for example, a company, is just like a clever trick of hijacking their hashtags. So and we've kind of helped petition starters do this before. So one of our amazing campaigners, Lucy, she was 13 when she started her campaign for Tesco's to stop selling caged eggs. And it was Easter time, and Tesco's had posted on Facebook like a post about Easter eggs, and for the long weekend. And so she basically hijacked that post and got all her signers, and it was like over 100,000 people to go to that post and just ask Tesco's to stop selling caged eggs. And because it was the bank holiday weekend, you know, it wasn't office hours, so some poor social media manager over the weekend was just you know, just swamped with all of these different posts. And you know, they weren't copying and pasting, they were all very different posts about Tesco's and their welfare policies. And then on the Tuesday, she got an email from Tesco's asking for her for a meeting. So things like that can really grab the attention of the company. So just keep an eye on what they're doing, and try to use that to your advantage.
Fascinating. That's really, really interesting. And just to echo Kajal and Annabelle's point, when something like that happens, to share it with the media can be really, really powerful, because these policymakers and, you know, change makers, they don't speak to the media in the same way that they speak to the public. So you have an opportunity to have real candor. So absolutely, from a journalistic perspective, I think this is absolutely wonderful advice.
Yeah.
We have a question from Amos Kimani. Amos asks, you have touched on various elements that you believe make a campaign successful, but I'm keen to know what you have learned personally, given your motivations to transition out of charity sector. And to that end, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you started off?
God, that's a great question. I think I really believe in diversity of thought, of experience. And I think for a long time, even in the charity sector, I felt like you had to be a kind of like a cookie cutter model of a person. And, you know, even types of campaigning, like, you know, individuals weren't really campaigning. Social media hadn't really taken off when I was started in the sector. And so in the last 10 years, we've seen the rise of, I guess, just authenticity, grassroots, you know, being yourself. And that's the power, I think, in people, that we are really, really powerful. We just get bombarded with ideas and notions that, you know, you have to speak and act in a certain way to have influence, and it's not true. But I think I needed to learn that. I don't think I could have known that when I started out. But I think that's really important. And I think that charity sectors, you know, I'm on a board of a charity, so I haven't quite left entirely. And I do think that the charity sectors are learning and listening and responding and getting better at empowering the people that they represent.
Absolutely. And really reassuring, I think, to me and hopefully others in the audience, that in the beginning you weren't necessarily sure, and it's important to kind of try things and make those mistakes and learn from them.
Yeah, totally.
Certainly an essential part of campaigning. Others have questions for Kajal? Would anybody like to unmute themselves and throw in a question? No, if not, I guess I will take the opportunity to thank Kajal. Thank you, Annabelle. What incredible speakers and such incredible insights here. I think there's so much to come away with and kind of enact immediately. So this has been absolutely fascinating. And thank you, Results, also for providing this platform. Extremely, extremely useful. With that, I think I'll hand over to either Jella or Aaron for some final comments.
Yeah, you're handing back to me. Thank you, Molly. Thank you to all of our speakers. Molly, thanks for chairing that last session so expertly, and of course for your presentation as well. Some really fascinating numbers and stats in there that I think should be giving us all hope. And particularly hearing some of the successes, campaigning and otherwise. I think this is a great way to end day one of the conference, juiced up with lots of energy and excitement about what we can achieve and how we can go about doing that. I think it's just really, really powerful. So thank you so much.